Game Time Decisions on the Fantasy Sports Network continues. I am Gabriel Morency. You know what else continues? The countdown to college football's kickoff. That's what else continues right now, as we are now just 54 days away from kickoff. Fuck. I got screwed up by the date. Sorry. I forgot to tell you, Joe. I forgot to mention. This is going to air Monday. So I'm going to say,
no problem.
I'm going to say the 4th of July is tomorrow. All right, that's where I fucked up.
Okay, you got it. I got it. Just tweet it out, and I'll tweet it out for you when you get it.
So it's 57 days now, but it's 54 days then. All right, 3.
Right, got it.
3, 2, 1. Game Time Decisions on the Fantasy Sports Network continues, as does the college football countdown. We are now just 54 days away from kickoff. Incidentally, we're also 54 days away from Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor. It's the same day, Saturday, August the 26th, a big day in the sports world. The college football season kicks off, and, of course, we have that big sham of a fight. It's not even called a fight. The big sham, the big ripoff as well, although Floyd's going to win easily. I'm going to have Moneyline parlayed with a bunch of college games. So let's bring in a guy that can get you ready for the college football season. We've been talking a lot about college football with Mark Lawrence. Of course, the Playbook is one of the best preview magazines, and it has been for a long time. Joe Lisi contributed to Mark Lawrence's Playbook, and Joe Lisi also has his first ever annual to come college football preview. Joe, it's always a pleasure. We're going for 2 with Joe Lisi. What's up, Joe?
Love the show, Gabe. Love talking college football. Chomping at the bit for week number 1.
Yeah, you and I have spoken a couple of times on Sports Rage Premium on the podcast, but it's good to have you back on the Fantasy Sports Network, now 54 days away. First things first, I want to wish you and yours a happy 4th of July, Joe. But let's jump right in as our boy Tony Miller over at the Golden Nugget. It's always a big day in late June when Tony releases his numbers for the college football games of the year. And I know you're already ready. You know, you've been breaking down games and been doing game-by-game previews on your Twitter account already, Joe. It's great stuff. I'm fired up for some football right now. And it's funny, though, I was looking for, like, big storylines and the big news of the past week and stuff. And right now, Joe, we're at the time of the year where really the only headlines you see are players getting suspended, arrested, not allowed in the school, etc. That's the time of the year we're in right now with college football. I swear, every headline I see is this kid pleads guilty and this kid pleads not guilty. This kid's going to be suspended for the first 2 games. That's the time of the year we're at right now in college.
Yeah, it really is. It's different than the NFL, where they obviously have training camps. College has involuntary football practices where the coaches can't partake. So, unfortunately, this is what you see, a lot of negative news coming out. But, unfortunately, it does help the people in Vegas and those that want to wager on games, because these are information that you need to make for week number 1 and moving forward throughout the college football season.
Yeah, Saturday, August the 26th, there's nothing really, really glamorous. Oregon State and Colorado State is the highest profile game, Stanford and Rice, but the action picks up in the following week after that. And the first game of the year that they posted a number for was Tulsa and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State minus 16. You and I talked a lot about Oklahoma State through the summer already, Joe. A dangerous football team, and I think an opening right now for Gundy and the Cowboys to step up, especially in the state, with the sudden departure of Bob Stoops. This should be a pretty high-scoring football game, shouldn't it, between the Cowboys and the Hurricane?
Yeah, it really should. I mean, when you look at this game overall, I do give the nod to Oklahoma State and quarterback Mason Rudolph. Only threw 4 interceptions with 28 touchdowns last year. It has 2 big play wide receivers in Jalen McCleskey and James Washington. I think Oklahoma State is the best team in the conference, with or without Bob Stoops at Oklahoma. And you look at Tulsa right now, they lose a lot of offensive talent. Their top 2 leading wide receivers are gone from last year, and quarterback Dane Evans is gone as well. So that's going to put a lot of pressure on that Tulsa offense to match Mason Rudolph score for score. And I like Oklahoma State to cover this number easy in week number 1.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma State have a chance to I think they can win the Big 12 this year as well. I love the season win total over for Oklahoma State, but I think they could be a very dangerous football team this year, and the Mason Rudolph is a dark horse for the Heisman. All right, let's get to some sexier games. All right, Maryland, Texas, not all that sexy. Texas are like 19-point favorites there. Then we get into Saturday, September the 9th, week 2. This is when business starts to pick up, and we've got the big boys facing off against each other. Nebraska is at Oregon. The Ducks are -7. What are you expecting from the Ducks this year? Is it going to be a transitional period? So we've got Taggart in Eugene right now. There's still a lot of talent there. Are they going to be a good team this year?
Unfortunately, I don't, Gabe. I think Willie Taggart's the right guy for Oregon overall. When you look at what Helfrich did over the last couple of seasons, they were 4-8 last year. But defensively, they really struggled. They allowed 41 points per game, which was their highest total scoring defense-wise since prior to the 2008 season. They allowed 246 rushing yards on the ground and 38 rushing touchdowns through 12 games. That's almost 3.1 touchdowns that they allowed on the ground per game. When you look at the offensive defensive line play, he preaches of physicality on both the offensive defensive lines. And in my opinion, I don't think they have the playmakers to play that style, especially week number 1 and week number 2, more importantly, against Nebraska. They lost this game in Lincoln last year by 3 points. And I like Mike Riley on the road in this matchup, even though Tommy Armstrong's not there. I think Nebraska's a live dog in Autzen Stadium.
You know, what's interesting, and obviously there's going to be a line movement, guys, from the original Golden Nugget lines, and some offshore books already have point spreads up, obviously, at this point in time. But Michigan were 3-point favorites against Florida. It's up to 5 right now, and I'm a Michigan Wolverine fan, and one thing that bothers me about Jim Harbaugh being a coach, Joe, is the public blindly bets on Michigan. So it's hard for me to bet on Michigan because we're never getting any good value with the point spread, and I'm not so sure Michigan should be 5-point favorites in this game when you consider they have one freaking returning starter on the defensive side of the football. They lost a ton of production on the offensive side of the football. They had 11 players drafted in this year's NFL draft. Yeah, I don't care who you are. You have 11 players, you lose 11 players to the NFL, and you're a college football team. That's a lot of talent to replace. I have confidence in Harbaugh that he's going to be able to navigate this, great recruiting classes and all that other stuff. But laying 5 points in the first week against the Gators, it's pretty dangerous.
Yeah, it really is, and it's a rematch of 2 years ago, the bowl game that Michigan dominated Florida in that matchup, so I expect a revenge factor in this game. I mean, when you look at Michigan overall, Gabe, you mentioned the defensive losses on that side of the ball with playmaker Jabril Peppers to that defense, but they lose 33 of the team's 46 total sacks from last year, which is 71%. They do have Rashawn Gary, a top 5 recruit that should be a star in the making this season. It's going to come down to whether Florida can run the football. They rushed for 126 yards per game last year, but in the last 6 games of the season, they did not have a rushing touchdown. There is a little bit of a transition with Malik Zaire expected to go to Florida. Is Luke Del Rio healthy? That's going to be the storyline that plays out in this ball game. But just from an SEC Big Ten matchup, I would take the points early on at this point in the season in July with Florida expecting revenge over the Wolverines.
That's a great point. You know, Big Ten has often historically struggled against SEC opponents in head-to-head matchups. And as you mentioned, Michigan kicked the crap out of them a couple of years ago in one of those bowl games, Outback Bowl or whatever the hell it was, one of those January 1 game bowl games. Yeah, they beat them up pretty good. One thing I would suggest, too, this from a sheer gambling perspective, is that I'd be very, very surprised if the number stayed here. It might be right now because of the uncertainty about the Florida Gator quarterback situation, but the Gators have a lot of talent. Michigan are starting a lot of, 76% of the starts last year for Michigan and Harbaugh were done by seniors. They got Evans back in the backfield. They got their quarterback back. I'm looking forward to seeing Peoples-Jones and Eddie McDoom do their thing. There's a lot of high-profile recruits on the Wolverines, but they got to go out there and do it. So I'm just stating, if you guys have the money and you're into that sort of thing, you get the Gators now at 5. I don't think it'll be 5 at kickoff. I think it'll come back down. One of the more intriguing games that I'm really looking forward to watching, too, on September the 9th is Auburn and Clemson. Auburn at Clemson. Clemson are 5.5-point favorites in this football game. And speaking of losing players to the NFL, the Clemson Tigers lost a lot of talent to the NFL. They lost the heart and soul of the football team with Deshaun Watson. There's some talent there, but the quarterback's position is up in the air. They got like 4 or 5 guys battling it out for the job. Are Clemson vulnerable in this game? And, of course, Auburn have Jared Stidham now, Joe. Are Auburn a live dog here? I think Auburn are a dangerous team coming into this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Gabe. I still like Clemson overall. They're my pick to win the ACC, and I think they're a possible, national contender again. I picked them to go to the playoff this year. When you look at the game overall against Auburn, they've dominated the Auburn Tigers over the last couple of years now. They are 1-3 straight. Dabo Swinney's 3-0 over Auburn in the last 3 games and have won those games by double digits, and they've dominated in recent years. I think the one thing when you look at the Clemson Tiger rush defense, they only gave up around 130 rushing yards per game. They have guys like Wilkinson, they have Farrell, and they still have Dexter Lawrence that are solid defensive playmakers that can run sideline to sideline. And let's talk about the offense. They still have guys like Deion Kane, Hunter Renfrow, and Ray McLeod that accounted for 50% of the receiving production. They have 2 big play running backs in Feaster and C.J. Fuller. I still like Clemson in Death Valley. I know Stidham is a solid quarterback, but again, they tried this 2 years ago with Jeremy Johnson. Auburn's over the last 2 years has only had 1 game where they threw for over 300 passing yards. Came in 2015 in the loss to Ole Miss and Chad Kelly. I still like Clemson with the defensive talent. I think they cover that line easy and knock off Auburn in that matchup.
You raise a lot of good points. I can't disagree. Well, the only thing I'll bring up is that Auburn haven't had a quarterback since Cam Newton. So I think now with Jared Stidham, they're actually going to have a quarterback. All right, so speaking of quarterbacks, we got Baker Mayfield against J.T. Barrett again. Ohio State went in there and got it done last year in Norman. Now Oklahoma's got to go back. Of course, Lincoln Riley takes over as the head coach, is 33 years old, offensive coordinator, gets the fast-track promotion. Me and Mark Lawrence had a gentlemanly disagreement about this game earlier in the week, right? We were talking about Ohio. We did a Big Ten preview, and we were going through, and we were talking about Ohio State. And I said, hey, I'm a Michigan fan, but I think Ohio State go 12-0 in the regular season. And he said, well, that Oklahoma game, he was saying 11-1. He thinks Oklahoma could knock them off. And I said there's no hope in hell they knock them off. And in fact, I think Ohio State drill them. I think Oklahoma's going to get messed up. It's 7 points, 6.5, 7 points right now. I'm willing to lay the points, and I'm an underdog bettor, but I'm not buying into Lincoln Riley and Oklahoma going in here. Where's Mixon right now? He's with the Bengals. Where's D.D. Westbrook? He's with the Jags. Where's Bob Stoops? I don't know, at church playing bingo? You know what I mean? Like, I don't see it. I think, and not to mention Urban Meyer's coming off a 31-0 loss. The first time that he's ever been shut out in his entire career. He's 61-6 with OSU. J.T. Barrett can't throw the football, but he's been there 16 years, so he's going to be good. To me, Ohio State, I like the points. I think Ohio State roll them here. I don't have a problem laying the 7.
Well, you bring up great points, Gabe. I'm not going to argue that, but I'm down on Ohio State for 2017. I picked them to go 8-4. A couple of factors why I like Oklahoma in this matchup.
Hey, I'm a Michigan fan, so I wouldn't mind seeing them go 8-4, but I think that's crazy talk. How do they go 8-4? Last year they were young and they're all back right now.
Yeah, well, I'm going to back it up. The last year they lose 19 of the team's 26 receiving touchdowns with Samuels, Noah Brown, and DeAndre Wilson moving on to the NFL. They lose Raekwon McMillan. They lose 3 starters from that secondary. They have a new offensive coordinator in Kevin Wilson. And I've always said this, with a new offensive coordinator, you might have the same talent, but you're seeing the game through a different set of eyes. It takes that coordinator a transition to understand how that talent responds in game situations, and he has to call a game plan around that talent. And more importantly, he might be either less aggressive or more aggressive than the previous coordinator, and that sometimes takes a transition. So that being said, let's look at Michigan State 2 years ago. They were a top 10 team that got knocked out of the playoff by Alabama. Everybody thought they would just rebound and be a top 10 team again, and they struggled in 2016 with a 3-9 overall record. What are the residual effects of the Ohio State loss to Clemson? I'm not so sure they just rebound, right away and just, go 12-0 this year. And secondly, I'll take my chances with Baker Mayfield, the senior quarterback. He's 22-4 overall as a starter the last 2 years. Again, I'm not sold on Oklahoma. I picked them 9-3 with Bob Stoops, but I think they're a live dog in this matchup. And against that secondary that's missing 3 starters, he's going to chuck it about 40 or 50 times in that matchup. I like Baker Mayfield on the road in the horseshoe to get the upset.
Yeah, I can't disagree. And one thing that I can't disagree with is the secondary. If you can throw the football, there's going to be some fresh faces and some raw bodies in the backfield for the Buckeyes. As you mentioned, we got Lattimore, Hooker, Conley, all big-time NFL draft picks. Yeah, I can't disagree with that, but I just don't buy in Oklahoma in big games. I think they're going to be in trouble, Baker Mayfield or not. All right, Joe, so before we get you out of here, we can go on and on. The last game I'll bring up right now, Georgia and Notre Dame. Kelly's definitely in the hot seat coming into this year. The Fighting Irish are 3-point favorites in this game. I like the quarterback play of Georgia down the stretch. I think they might have found a new Matt Stafford there in Athens. What do you make of this one with an SEC team getting 3 points against the Irish?
Yeah, the one thing I like Georgia this year coming out of the SEC East, they're my pick. I have them going to the SEC championship game against Alabama. You mentioned Jacob Eason. I mean, he threw 8 touchdowns and 3 interceptions over the last 6 games of the year. He progressed, and that'll help that offense entering 2017. They have 2 big play running backs in Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. And more importantly, you look at the secondary led by Dominic Sanders. I mean, they only allowed 181 passing yards per game, and Georgia did record 23 of the team's 29 total sacks over the last 8 games of the year. That showed progression under Kirby Smart. I think this is a live dog as well. I think Georgia wins the East, and I think they dominate this matchup on the road over over Notre Dame and Brian Kelly in South Bend.
Joe Lisi, goforthe2.com. Go for the 2 on Twitter. And, Joe, you put a lot of work and did a great job with your college football preview. Why don't you let the viewers and the listeners know where they can purchase it?
Yeah, they could find it on Fantasy Sports Network, Gabe. It's on all fantasysports.com/radio. It's on Sports Grid. It's across every website that Fantasy Sports has. So happy to be a part of it, and I think it's a great read for college football fans.
And available on Amazon as well, right?
Yes, it's on Amazon as well, correct.
So wherever you guys can find it, get it. And nice and simple. Go to the Fantasy Sports Network website. Click the link for Joe Lisi's college football preview. You're going to be a hell of a lot smarter for it, as you can tell. Listen, games are 54 days away, and Joe's talking about these games like they're tomorrow. He's ready to go. Joe, you're a class act. Thanks for the time.
You too, Gabe. Love the show. Anytime.
Joe Lisi, goforthe2.com. I'm fired up for some college football. We're going to continue our college football previews on Wednesday with Mark Lawrence. We did the Big Ten last week. We're going to do the Big 12